To look for the missing Marta themselves. That's what he assured the disgruntled aunt. Her beloved pickiness will be found very soon, and this is what real professionals are trying to do. And now one of the specialist's parents is persistently asking him to come home, because tomorrow is the school day. Even though there's still a little bit of the school year left, there's no need to relax. Chapter 6. Arthur clicks his tongue. Dennis and Maxim have agreed on how to act. After school, they drop off their things at Babushina Khata. Then they go to the meeting place. Moreover, they walk to the bus stop together, and then Bylan gets on the first transport they need, and Chernenko gets on the next trolleybus or minibus that goes in that direction. When Maxim is near McDonald's, he must stand calmly and not look for Dennis. "Don't worry," his friend assured him. "I won't take my eyes off you. The main thing is that whoever comes to meet you doesn't realize that you're not alone. I even think that he will also show up earlier, to count you out and make sure that you came alone, unaccompanied." "Me too," he found spies, Maxim grimaced, but more for the sake of order. He was not yet used to the fact that in this story Chernenko began to think and draw the right conclusions first. Like any wise man, Bylan is always ready to admit that someone is right, even when he himself wanted to be the smartest. "Spies, not spies, you still have to beware," Dennis said instructively. He, on the other hand, was beginning to like the fact that this time he was seizing the initiative. As planned, so they did. The day seemed sunny, the sky cloudless. The scorching sun, as for May, blinded his eyes. Maxim, stomping near McDonald's, looked around in all directions, shielding himself from the rays with his palm. No matter where he turned, the sun was still blinding. The playground was surprisingly quiet. It was obvious that the children had already had time to play with their parents to their heart's content during the long weekend. Turning once more to face the exit from the underpass near the bus station, that's where he was expecting the stranger to appear, Maxim suddenly heard behind him. "Hello, young man." The voice was familiar. Although Maxim was waiting for someone, he still flinched. A dog-sniffing man had appeared all too unexpectedly. He looked around, then turned around with his whole body. Nothing special. A man as a man. Or rather, a boy. True, something about him immediately repelled Maxim, made him automatically take a step back. He understood right away, the smell. When you're standing in the middle of a bustling square and in very warm weather, an unpleasant smell hits your nostrils right away. The young man smelled as if he had just left the zoo, where he had been cleaning a brown bear's cage for a month. And although he was dressed normally, jeans, sneakers, a denim jacket over a plain t-shirt and a cap with a large peak on his head, the smell proved that the stranger did live in some other world. And one inhabited mostly by four-legged animals. Dogs. Yes, the stranger in the cap smelled of dogs. The smell was not too strong to make passers-by look around. But still enough to make anyone who found themselves in the same company with him feel a little uncomfortable. "Well, I'm here," the young man spread a wide smile, and held out a firm hand to the guy. "Hello again. My name is Artur. Who are you with us?" "Maxim," Bylan lightly shook the outstretched hand. "So, Max, do you have money with you? Did you bring it? And where is my dog?" the guy immediately asked. "Wow, you're so smart, Maxim," Arthur clicked his tongue. "Great. So we'll make a deal. In short, did you like the photo of the dog? Didn't you say?" "That's right," Arthur agreed and clicked his tongue again. "I thought you'd guess. When a person gets lost, their photo is the first thing they bring. You know, I would hardly recognize my dog in a photo of two dogs of the same age, sex, and breed," Bylan confidently declared. "Oh." Arthur clicked his tongue a third time. So small, but such golden words. "So, a pike, a bitch," Maxim flinched at this word, although he knew it was, decent, 3 years old, "their name is Marta. Wasn't she wearing a collar?" "Well, you know, Some dog owners put the dog's nickname and their address on the collars. I know. Only Marta didn't have such a collar. It's worse, Artur spread his hands. Nothing, we'll find it. It'll take about 3 days of work, but come on, young man, it won't work out quickly. Only for free, you know, you're an adult now, nothing, another, click, and this manner began to seriously annoy Bailen, as did Artur's smell. Yes, I understand, the boy sighed heavily, reaching into the back pocket of his school trousers. But you know, I don't have everything here. Well, I'll bring the change, of course. Here's just how much. Before meeting the stranger, Maxim resorted to tricks. He went to the supermarket, where his mother had recently sent him shopping and where the cashiers knew him, and exchanged all the money he had been saving for roller skates. There wasn't that much. However, for convenience, having piled up some round sum of change, Maxim exchanged everything for large bills. Now he did the opposite, getting a plump stack instead of a few pieces of paper. The calculation is simple. First, a thick wad of money always works in a pinch. Without looking back, Maxim suddenly felt a chill inside. What if he had arrived by car? How then could Dennis put his feet on him? It worked out. Artur pushed on to the nearest bus stop and, judging by everything, was going to go somewhere along Nauka Avenue. Chernenko popped out of the bus station door and, as if it were nothing to do with anything, followed him. Bailen's legs buckled from the sudden decision. He hadn't expected anything like that from himself. Chapter 7. Dog's Territory. In the minibus, Dennis casually perched himself opposite Kepka, as he had christened Arthur to himself. He wrinkled his nose. There was something subtly disgusting about this guy. He politely asked him to pay for the fare. And then he defiantly turned away from the window, as if he didn't care who was going where and why. However, despite the outward calm, the champion was like a coiled spring inside. Always ready to straighten up and jump out after Kepka at the first stop. However, Kepka seemed to be in no hurry. He sat calmly, also looking out the window and, it seemed, not paying attention to the passengers who were trying to move away from him as far as possible. As much as the space of the minibus allowed. So they reached Korchovady. Kepka began to get ready for the exit. Dennis pushed after him. They went out almost simultaneously, and the champion forced himself to delay a little. He sat down, pretending that the lace on his sneaker had come untied. He waited for Kepka to disappear into the underpass. He hurried after him. Having crossed the road, the unpleasant young man waited at the stop on the other side for another minibus. He obviously knew he would have to wait a long time. He bought a small glass of seeds from a grandmother at a tiny street market and began to peel them, spitting the husks under his feet. It seemed that Kepka paid no attention to anyone or anything. Deciding not to tempt fate, Dennis, glancing in the direction of the young man, nevertheless did not go in a straight line, but made a circle, went around the object from the rear and approached the stop from the other side. Just in time, the brown minibus had just arrived. Chernenko did not look at the license plate, rushed into the cabin, saw an empty seat by the window right near the exit, and hurriedly squeezed in, pushing a fat woman with baskets. "They're climbing here, they're climbing," she grumbled, and Dennis was scared. Now everyone would be looking at him. It worked out. None of the passengers cared about the 7th grader. Where they were going now, Chernenko didn't know. He had never been to these parts before. The big houses were slowly being left behind, and here and there a strip of water could be seen through the lush green thickets. Where had this Kepka gone? Far away from people. When the driver habitually announced, "The end," Dennis jumped out first and ran away, towards the only residential building in the area. The people who got out after him moved in unison. Only Kepka took a step in the opposite direction. A narrow asphalt path led to the left, somewhere among the trees and bushes. Having counted to 10, Chernenko set off after him. When the last island of civilization was left behind, the boy heard another minibus stop behind him. But he didn't look back, he was afraid of losing Kepka and getting lost himself. But, as it turned out, it was still difficult to get lost here. The asphalt path led to some kind of mesh fence. It fenced off a large area, beyond which Dennis first saw a booth with a guard, and after taking a few steps closer, the mounds of overturned boats. Kepka headed there confidently, without looking back. But still, Dennis got off the asphalt and began to move from tree to tree. There, among the trees and small piles of household garbage, he saw the first dog. It was an ordinary mongrel, one of those called dogs of unknown breed. The dog climbed out of the bushes, saw the boy, and stopped for a moment. Chernenko also froze. There was little to be expected from a wandering friend of man. The dog lowered its head, as if deciding whether to bark at a stranger or not, and then, for good measure, growled and went about its business. The meeting distracted Dennis from his main goal, and when he looked for Kepka, he saw, having waved a friendly hand to the guard in a spotted uniform, the young man was moving forward and could disappear among the boats at any moment. Several hefty black dogs ran out to meet him at once. One dog even barked menacingly, but Kepka, without stopping, patted the animal on the head as he went, and the pack of dogs, not paying attention to the young man, ran somewhere to the shore. So Dennis put two and two together, this one in the cap is his own. And he does have to deal with dogs. And a serious one, because these animals recognize him. However, the local friends of man did not look friendly at all. Chernenko somehow did not want to be bitten by a pack of nobody's four-legged animals. He did not want to retreat either. Therefore, without thinking twice, Dennis ran to the mesh fence, hoping that the guard would not notice him from his place, jumped up, grabbed the metal edge of the mesh with his hands, helped himself with his feet, grabbed it more comfortably, pulled himself up, and now he was already climbing into the forbidden territory. Where he ended up, Chernenko still did not understand. Everywhere, wherever he looked, there were boats, old and new, there were boats and, most unpleasantly, from time to time a dog barked. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw two dogs. The boy didn't know much about breeds, but he knew what Caucasian and German shepherds were. A black Caucasian and a brown German with reddish-tan markings ran towards him. An inner voice told Dennis, "This is not a sad mongrel, these won't even bark, they'll rush, chase, you won't escape." Looking around frantically in different directions, Chernenko saw a small hut. It looked very much like a shed where various tools were kept. The grandmother in the village hid shovels, rakes, and a hoe in a similar hut. There was no time to think. Rushing like a hare to the rescue shelter, Dennis rushed inside and closed the surprisingly strong door for such a hut behind him. Just in time. A door creaked right next to him. Heavy footsteps were heard. A man's voice said irritably, "How many times have I asked you, Arthur, don't leave the shed open?" Dennis huddled in the darkest corner. As he walked, he picked up a piece of dirty tarpaulin that was lying on the floor and pulled it towards him. The door opened. Something softly clattered nearby. And then, to the champion's great horror, keys rattled outside. Chapter 8. In Captivity. The footsteps receded. Dennis pushed the tarpaulin off him, got on all fours, crawled up to the wooden wall of the shed, and lightly touched it with his hand. It was made of boards, and the best ones at that. Apparently, the building material was parts of very old boats. And although the shack at first glance seemed like a matchbox house, up close it turned out to be clumsy, but quite solidly built. This does not mean that it cannot be broken. A few good blows with the shoulder or the foot, and that's it, the captive is free. However, there's no way to get out quietly. And the local dogs will probably be the first to run to the noise. For some reason, Dennis wasn't sure that Kepka and his friend from the trailer would hurry to call the dogs back when they started twitching at the uninvited guest. Scolding himself for his stupid mistake, Chernenko stood up straight, shook out his pants on his knees and looked at what the owner had thrown into the shed. A huge sack lay on the ground and stirred. Approaching it, Dennis timidly touched it with his foot. Inside, it stirred more, a whining sound was heard. Of course, there was some kind of animal there. Obviously, a dog, since this whole story is already tied up with dogs. Deciding not to untie the sack, Dennis went to the door. Now it was clear why they were so strong, they sometimes hid something here, and prying eyes didn't need to know what it was. He pushed open the door. It was closed. When it would be opened, who knew? I wouldn't want to spend the night here, on a dirty tarpaulin, next to a dog in a bag. Let's say the bag was taken away. But they wouldn't forget to close the door again. Would I have to give up and come up with an explanation for these dog owners? Kepka wasn't stupid. He would immediately remember the boy who had been sitting across from him in the minibus. He would put 2 and 2 together, and he would understand everything. Only now did Dennis understand the seriousness and danger of his situation. And when he was ready to finally despair, he heard behind the thin wall. "Edgy, are you here? This can't be." Bylan, his voice. Where did he come from? Here. Dennis rushed to the voice and saw through the gap between the boards the eye and part of his partner's face. Quiet. Maxim warned. Sit still, I'll think of something. How are you here? When I saw that you were following Artur with your eyes, I couldn't help myself. What the hell, Artur? That's his name. The one we're watching. You see, your feet carried you forward on their own. When we got to Corcovady, I thought, I'll lose you. I was lucky, the minibuses somehow so unusually, almost one after the other, approached. You understand, I didn't want to call you. The hardest thing turned out to be climbing over the fence and not running into the dogs. Maxim told Dennis the main thing, but, of course, not everything. He couldn't let Chernenko continue to play first violin. Having followed Dennis, Bylan at some point decided to equalize their chances in this way. But everything turned out so that Maxim got the opportunity to pull his friend out of the involuntary trap. Dennis, meanwhile, did not know his friend's thoughts and did not care about them. He was satisfied with how everything was going, and he wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. And yet, Bylan decided not to rush. Peeking out from behind the wall of the shed, he hid again, pressed against the crack in the boards. Listen to me, he said. Stay here for now, and I will take a closer look at these dog kings. It seems to me that now there is a chance to find out, if not about everything, then at least about a lot. Okay. Go ahead, Dennis resignedly said. Just be careful. The dogs here are like those werewolves. I've noticed, Maxim agreed, not yet fully understanding how he planned to quietly free Chernenko from captivity. He looked to the left, glanced to the right, looked straight ahead, there seemed to be no dogs in sight. And no people either. Gathering himself, Maxim in one bound covered the distance from the shack shed to the trailer and literally rolled into it. When he turned over on his stomach, he almost fainted. Right in front of his face, 10 centimeters away, was a dirty tin bowl with some kind of food. Obviously not for humans. So, the dog for whom it was intended could come running right now. However, it was too late to change places. There was a crash overhead, and they went down the stairs first. Arthur. Didn't we agree not to look for problem dogs? Now there was a threat in the spotted one's voice. Hey. What problems are there? Very big, Arthur. It's good if you solve them. And what if not? I took some kid's last savings from the piggy bank. Mom probably gave him pies and lemonade, he didn't finish eating, didn't finish drinking, and all for what? So that some Arthur could just mess everything up. Maxim bit his lip under the trailer. They've been cleverly miscalculated and split him up, you can't say anything. It's not hard to guess how the schoolboy managed to collect a fortune from small bills. But not everyone is able to understand what a treasure this trifle can be for a 7th grader and what hopes he can place on it. When the boy realizes that the bad Arturco took his half-eaten pies from the beginning of the school year and made a lemonade out of them, he will run to complain to his mother. Spotted seemed to read Maxim's thoughts. Okay, the boy has lost his beloved dog somewhere. Let the boy even be scolded. It's just one thing, the dog ran away somewhere, and quite another, an adult swindler takes away a naive child's hard-earned penny, his only treasure, for nothing. Mom brings this unpleasant fact to the attention of Dad at dinner. And Dad begins to find out who he is, the bad young man Artur, who is swindling money from naive children. That, Arthur, is half the trouble. The trouble is when the boy's dad calls the police uncles for help. And these uncles in uniform find out who the bad Artur is friends with and has common business with. Did we really start our little business to get so stupidly fired up? Why immediately, fired up? Arthur spoke at the same time indignantly and tearfully. Because, my friend, a dog of the picky breed is not a rarity in our glorious city. But it is not that common anymore. You are unlikely to be able to get one in the 3 promised days. Now Spotted's voice had lost all its instructiveness and good-naturedness. The man switched to a harsh tone. We agreed, we will only search for missing dogs of common breeds. Of those that can be easily found and returned to the bereaved dog owners. In the worst case, you, Arthur, steal some valuable dog, and then offer the inconsolable owner to buy back the pet. We have successfully carried out 7 such operations, and now, because of your greed, you want to ruin everything? Have you set your sights on the boy's savings? Now Maxim was gradually beginning to understand what was happening and what the main idea of the 2 swindlers was. Of course, this understanding could hardly help him get his own money back. And the prospects of helping the girl Tanya were now becoming unrealistic. But you can try to bring this sweet couple to clean water. And suddenly Maxim froze. All thoughts flew out of his head at once, except for one, save. A huge black dog, very similar to the guard dog from the horror movie The Omen, ran out at a jog from behind the boats. Dad, in general, did not advise a boy his age to watch such films, but the scary movies did not bother Bylan at all. In addition, the film, downloaded from the internet in Grandma's hut, despite his parents' prohibition, was not very pleasant to Maxim. They talk for too long there, it will never get to the point. Another thing is about transforming robots. The guy only watched this movie twice in the cinema. But only in American movies do they come up with living robots that transform into trucks and cars and make friends with teenagers. And the huge black dog that approaches the trailer and, who would have doubted it, runs to its bowl, is very real. So far, he hasn't seen a stranger. A little more, he will see, bark, rush to chase the stranger away from his bowl. He will have to run away screaming, and that's it, he has been seen. Arthur will definitely recognize his client and is unlikely to want to just let the guy go. Hold on. Don't give Dennis away. Shout louder so that he hears and understands, he has to get out himself. Maxim immediately developed a plan of action: fool the men, dodge, stall for time, maybe even take him somewhere far away, come up with something. If only they hadn't thought of setting all the dogs on him. A healthy black dog was approaching. Now he was very close. Maxim could see white foam dripping from his gaping mouth. Maybe it was saliva. Maybe the dog just wanted to drink. Maybe he wasn't that scary anymore, and all the horrors of the world had been imagined by the boy out of fear. Maxim slowly, like a snake, crawled back, preparing to roll out from under the trailer and do some legwork at the first dog's howl. Riot! Riot! Artur exclaimed, bent down abruptly, picked up a stick from the ground and threw it far into the bushes. The dog froze in place, crouched, and then instantly rushed after the stick. Without tempting fate, Maxim quietly crept out of his hiding place, crawled to the rusty chest of iron, which had once driven along the streets and was a Zaporizhet's car, and crept behind it. The men were talking loudly, and from his new position the boy could hear everything. "The circus is crying for you," said Spotted. What are you doing? Suddenly, a truly great artist has died in me. Arthur replied boastfully. Meanwhile, Bayan brought him a stick, looked under the trailer. He stuffed his mouth into the bowl, ate a little and ran back with a sense of self-esteem, soon disappearing from sight. By the way, said Spotted. Go and feed our guests. It will be bad if the owners don't recognize their friends. Then come back, we haven't finished talking to you yet. The legs, shod in army boots, climbed the stairs again. It is clear that Maxim had not seen the face of Arthur's boss during all this time. But Arthur himself immediately came out from behind the trailer, picking up a tin bucket as he went. He walked straight towards Maxim, and he crouched down. But Arthur, humming "man, dog, friend," passed his hiding place and went somewhere behind the trees. In order to see what was happening there, Bayan, risking being exposed, got up a little. Where Arthur had pushed the bucket, there was another shed. A small one, apparently recently demolished and in good conscience. With a soft click of the latch, the young man called inside, "I'm bringing lunch, don't fight." Then he went in, closing the door behind him. "Here.